All rise. Please be seated.
Yes, Mr. Griffiths.
May it please Your Honours. Mr. Taylor, just before lunch, I rather prematurely placed before you a map. But before we come to the map, I think we need to lay a bit more groundwork. Now, upon your release, following that second incarceration in Ghana, did you travel anywhere outside Africa?
After my release from Ghana, I went straight to Ivory Coast. Then I went to Burkina Faso, verified my trip into, I went into Libya to see the situation of the men, returned, and then before I went to France.
Why did you go to France?
I did not put the second NPFL together alone. This second NPFL was put together by those of us. I remember saying to the court, there was a group in La Côte d'Ivoire. Now, working along with us in La Côte d'Ivoire was a gentleman called Tony King.
Pause there, please. How do you spell the first name?
Tony. T-O is the file name. T-O-N-Y-I-A, I want to believe. If it's wrong, we can correct it another day. Working with me outside, and may I just emphasize, Tony went along for some time, but once the Libyan connection was cemented, Tony broke away from us. He no longer participated, but two others remain. There's a gentleman called Tom Wowuyu. We mentioned that on yesterday. That's W-O-W-E-I-Y-U. And the present president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. The three of us finally were the individuals that put the NPFL together. So upon leaving Ghana, I had traveled to Paris to meet with Ellen Johnson and Tom Wowuyu in Paris.
And when you say that the current president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, was one of the organizers, in what way did she assist?
Oh, Ellen. Ellen is an old revolutionary. She's been involved in, she was involved in part with the first NPFL. That was not new to Ellen.
Which first NPFL?
I remember I told the court that the first invasion into Liberia that was launched by General Kuwompa was called the NPFL. And this second, or maybe it's better to say this continuation of the NPFL, Ellen was also a very good part of it, because Ellen was also a very close friend of General Kuwompa.
So she was involved in the Kuwompa crew?
Well, I am, when you hear me say she was involved, I will not be able to give you all of the details because I'm sure, from the prosecution questions will come. I was out, but I know she was close to Kuwompa, and the extent of her involvement, if I'm pressed on this, I wouldn't be able to give you the extent, but I do know she was associated with Kuwompa. She associated with the training outside where she knew about it, okay, and she knew about ours. But in my case, she was really involved in helping me financially.
Financially how?
Oh, Ellen raised money throughout while the training was going on. In fact, I had taken the first two picture groups to her in Paris. She had then moved to the United States.
The first two what?
Picture groups. The first group, remember I mentioned here just before the break that the trainees went into groups. The first two groups had gone, and I did mention that in the second group was Moses Blah, or Blah. We had pictures of these combatants. So I flew into Paris. We met at Orly Airport, in fact, at the Holiday Inn Hotel at Orly Airport, where I was. She came and I showed her the two sets of pictures. She was very, very pleased. And then this was really to convince her that her efforts were not being wasted in what she was doing. And by that I mean she was doing two things. Ellen raised most of the money that we needed for all of this movement in the early stage and even during combat. And secondly, I now cannot go back to the United States. She is, if I'm not mistaken, is working with a bank somewhere in the Washington, D.C. area and has tremendous contacts. So we use Ellen to do our so-called diplomatic contacts outside and to raise money.
Now, another name you mentioned was Tom Wuiyu.
That is correct.
Can I inquire whether we have a spelling for that name?
Yes, we do.
Now, do you recall telling us that he was a member of the union, ULAA?
That is correct.
And when did you first come across him?
Oh, I first met Tom in the early 70s, around 1972.
Where?
In the United States when I arrived, and this process of trying to put together the different organizations that I explained to the court in different parts of the United States. Tom was stationed in the state of New Jersey, one of the largest chapters of the union, and was very influential in working with different groups in the New York, New Jersey area.
Now, did he remain in the United States during this period we're concerned with now, when you're traveling around West Africa to put the NPFL together?
No. Tom made several trips to West Africa, even before the men were moved to Libya. He made several trips. We were in and going through the organizational phase of this, so he made several trips during the organizational phase. Ellen did not come to West Africa to see me during this phase of putting men together. She was busy in Washington. But, you know, Tom was in direct contact with her, and whatever little funds she could raise, he would bring it down. We moved to Libya. Tom is still coming in and out. He goes to Libya many, many times, even when I can't be there, because I do not live in Libya. I want to visit the camp, maybe for a day or two, live at the Mataba, come back. Tom is moving up and down, but Ellen doesn't come.
Now, so we've dealt with Tom Wuiyu. I just want to ask you a little bit more, please, about Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. When did you first met her?
Oh, Ellen. Ellen was in Liberia during the coup years of 1980. Ellen was there. Ellen had an apartment at a penthouse on Broad Street at top of the Ministry of Education building. So she was there. She went and came and became very friendly, and very, very friendly.
With whom?
With General Taman Skuwampa.
And what What about you? Were
Oh.
you friends with her?
Oh yes, I knew Ellen at that time, exactly. Because Kuwangpa went nowhere almost without me, of course. We got to know each other then.
Yes. My question is very simple. Were you friends with her?
Well, I would say yes, because she was very close to my friend General Kuwangpa, so we became friends.
And what about Johnson Sirleaf's relationship with Doe?
No, to the best of my recollection, Ellen really never got along with Doe.
And what happened to Ellen after the October 1985 elections in Liberia?
Oh, to the best of my recollection, I think Ellen was arrested.
By whom?
By Samuel Doe, who was the president. And I understand that she managed to get out, I don't know how, of Liberia, and she was saved by some, I understand, some mutual friends. It is believed that she was helped by a gentleman, a very good friend of hers, or at least I hope they are still friends, called Gabriel Doe. I understand assisted in getting her out of the country when she got out of prison.
Now, so putting all of this together, who were the main people in putting together this second NPFL?
Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Charles Ganke Taylor, and Thomas, who were you? Finally.
Were there others involved in an organizational capacity?
Not really, not really. I just mentioned to the court that there were others that dropped, including the gentleman I mentioned, Tony King. He dropped aside because he just wouldn't go to Libya. He was just frightened he wouldn't go there. We're talking about the Cold War period, and that name, Libya, was almost like Black Snake. You know, we appreciated Libya for what they were doing, supporting the whole Pan-African idea, so we were not frightened to be labeled whatever they wanted to call us.
Now, Tonya King, what was his background?
Tonya King is married to the daughter of the late President William Ira Talbot, that we discussed here, that was killed in the coup d'etat by Doe. And immediately thereafter, he settled in La Côte d'Ivoire.
Now, was Tonya King in a position to provide any particular assistance to those seeking to put together the NPFL?
Oh, definitely. Tonya assisted in providing little food, the contact. He's in La Côte d'Ivoire living with his wife. He's known by all of the senior people in the Ivorian establishment. Why? Remember I spoke about Daisy being married to A.B. Talbot, the son of the late William Ira Talbot, whose sister is married now to Tonya King. So there is sympathy in the establishment for that family in total. And so he helps substantially. He helps in whatever way he can. And I'm saying to you, he breaks away at the Libyan part that apparently he just couldn't take, I guess.
Apart from contacts with the Ivorian establishment, did he have any other contacts in Côte d'Ivoire?
Yes, of course. Tonya had been a very, he was trained in the intelligence field. In fact, at the time of the coup d'etat in Liberia, Tonya is what we call Commissioner of Immigration and Naturalization, which is a part of the security establishment. He had good friends among the British and American embassies in Ivory Coast. He had very good contacts.
Contacts with whom within those embassies?
Of course, the officials, the ambassador, the intelligence people. He knew all of them.
Intelligence people like whom?
I don't know the names of the individuals, but when we talk about intelligence from the United States, especially external intelligence, we're talking about what? The Central Intelligence people. He did not introduce us to them because he's an intelligence officer, but he had extensive contacts with them.
And was that of assistance to the NPFL?
Well, I didn't ask Tony where he got his little money from, but he assisted with little funds and meals, and things were just made easy for us. Remember now, moving people across West Africa, from Ivory Coast to Burkina Faso to Libya, there was no leakage anywhere. No one, nowhere, anywhere on this planet knew at that particular time that Charles Taylor was training people in Libya. So I must assume that those connections were used very well because we moved people throughout that region. We got travel documents for them. So Tony used his links very well.
Let me just pause for a moment. Dealing with the same topic, did you have a secretary when you were at the GSA, Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Can you recall her name?
Yes.
What is it?
My secretary at the General Services Agency was called Grace B. Minor. It was not just secretary, it was something like an assistant directorship and special assistant. Grace Beatrix Minor, who later on also fled to the United States. And after I
When
left,
did she flee to the United States?
at the time of my departure from the General Services Administration, when Clarence Mamadou arrived at the GSA, he went after Grace Minor and the Deputy Blambo Nelson that I said is now Senator in Liberia. Blambo remained in Liberia, but Grace went to the United States, and she remained in contact with me throughout this period and was the second main link to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. That was a very, very, very close buddy of Grace Minor.
Now,
Mr. Griffiths, two things: the spelling of minor
M-I-N-O-R.
and the date of the French trip. When it was that you went to France.
Okay, that is after I come out of jail. I'm going to have to approximate this, Justice. I'm released from the prison in Accra in late, let's say, 86. I go, so that trip to Paris has to be somewhere in the first half of 87.
Now, so that's Grace Minor. Now, you've already told us that many of your recruits came from Liberians living in Côte d'Ivoire. Was there anyone in particular who had the main responsibility for that process of recruitment in the Côte d'Ivoire?
Yes, the one that comes to mind is the late Alfred May. Alfred was responsible. He's late now. He's the one that comes to mind right now.
You mentioned earlier a man called Moses Dupo.
That's correct.
Now, who was Moses Dupo?
Moses Dupo was a mutual friend of mine and General Thomas Kuwamba. We were in the States together in the Union of Liberian Associations in the Americas. I think I mentioned that in my testimony on yesterday. It so happened that Tupi, my wife's sister was also, Tupi's sister was also married to Moses Dupo. So we were in the union together, but these are two guys that were married in the same family. So we were very close. He was very, very close to General Kouampa also, and was also in La Côte d'Ivoire at the time.
Now, you spoke of a split with Tonya King over the Libyan connection. Was Tonya King the...
Excuse me, but I think that mischaracterizes what the witness said. He didn't talk about a split. He talked about Mr. King being afraid to go to Libya.
Yes,
Very well.
Okay, but I can clarify that.
Well, can you help us then,
Yes.
please, Mr. Taylor?
I think counsel is right. Tonian is with me all the way, but he just would not travel to Libya. He was afraid. And again, we are in this period of the Cold War, and Libya is not the type of word that anybody wants to hear. And just to, I don't want to use the word speculate because the court does not accept that, but my own guess, I'll put it this way, is that Tonya has intelligence connections, and maybe it's good that he didn't go, because his connections with the diplomatic committee in Ivory Coast just might have exposed him. But he did not go, and so I got upset and felt that if we had put men together to send for training and he was not prepared to visit them as Tom had visited them, and it's not like in Ellen, who was in the United States and by coming would have probably burned her track, they would have gotten to know. But being right in West Africa, if he didn't go, then we had to drop him, and we dropped him.
Was anybody else dropped from the original organizing group?
No, nobody else was dropped. The Moses Duopos of this world and the other people, as we advanced in this process, maybe I can see where your questions are coming from. I just want to explain this. There were some of the individuals down there that were anxious and wanted to get people to train. They wanted to fight. They were reluctant, and may I just suggest scared, when it came to Libya. They will go all the way, oh my God, if the people know that we in Libya, it will be so some of us were prepared to do it because we believe in this whole Pan-African approach, and we knew how Libya had been helping other areas like this terrible apartheid regime in South Africa, that if it had not been for Gaddafi, they would probably still be sitting there, you understand me? And they would still be sitting in Southwest Africa that we now call Namibia. And most of these revolutionary movements, just at that particular time, Libya was something like a black snake, but some of us were prepared, because this man was genuine in trying to help the Pan-African cause. And I'm not talking terrorism, I'm talking about the Pan-African cause. So those of our friends and brothers that wanted to do something but were not prepared we just had to drop them. That included the Duopos of this world and the rest of them. King,
The rest of them like who?
Oh, there's just so many of them in La Côte d'Ivoire. Harry Newman was down there. He didn't go along. Sam Doki was there. It's a whole bunch of them. I mean, it's a whole list that were not prepared to take that extra step to get training done in Libya. Maybe in any other place they would have, but Libya was a no-no.
Doki? How do you spell it?
Samuel Doki, D-O-K-I-E, Samuel Doki. He joined me subsequently, but he was in the area.
Does the name General Podia mean anything to you, Mr. Taylor?
I'm
Portier
gonna
was the,
object. That's a leading question.
Well, it is leading, Mr. Griffiths, but are you asking something that's an issue, or?
Well, I was hoping it wasn't an issue, Your Honor, but maybe I ought to tread with care. I don't know if it's bleeding, but still. Who was Samuel Doe's vice president on the PRC?
after the execution of General Thomas Ware Saint that we've mentioned here, General Portier became the vice head of state.
Did he remain in that position?
No. General Portier, the question that you asked me earlier, if I were to begin to name everybody, it would be virtually impossible because everyone that was anti-Doe was out of Liberia there, including Portier. Portier was there.
How did Portier come to be there?
Well, Portier had, he had also broken away. After the elections of Samuel Doe, Portier and all of these guys were sidelined. And I'm talking about the election of October 1985. They were all sidelined, and Portier and all of these guys became disgruntled and left the country and were prepared to fight to remove Doe.
In what circumstances did General Portier leave Liberia?
I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact situation. I was not in Liberia at the time, but I know that his life was under threat and he came out of Liberia.
Now, you've told us about groups of Liberians training in Ghana, in Libya. Did anything happen in relation to General Portier and any such attempt?
Well, let's get the sequence here right. These guys, Portier, Dupu, all of them remain in La Côte d'Ivoire. The men are now training, and I think early to middle 1987, Portier, now so impatient, may I say, foolishly decides that he has found an African witch doctor that can make him invisible. And so he's going to become invisible, go to Liberia, enter the mansion, catch Doe, and take power. Now, it may sound crazy, but this is exactly what happened. He goes into Liberia, but before then, Doe begins to lure him into Liberia. Doe tells him to come back, and I'll make you vice president. Okay, we are not now in La Côte d'Ivoire. We're moving our people for our training in Libya. So he foolishly agrees and says that now that he has this so-called witch doctor disappearing power, he will accept the invitation, go and catch Doe and kill him. So he goes, and as he reaches Ganta, this is a town in Nimba County. Doe is already prepared for him. Doe arrests him and I think one other gentleman and kills him. That's the end of the Portier story.
Now I want to look in more detail at the actual logistics involved in putting together the NPFL. Where did the main recruitment take place?
La Côte d'Ivoire.
And for the most part, those recruited came from which ethnic groups in Liberia?
About 90% were members of the Gio and Mana ethnic groups from Nimba County.
By which route did they travel from Côte d'Ivoire to Libya?
They traveled via road from Cote d'Ivoire, Ouagadougou, and then a flight to Libya.
Who paid for it?
Not the Libyan, the Libyan Mataba paid for it.
In what numbers did they travel from Côte d'Ivoire to Libya?
They traveled in small groups, 15, 20, not large groups at a time, to make sure that it was just not too open to large numbers of persons moving. Some of them would travel by buses, some would travel by train into Ouagadougou.
And where did they obtain the necessary travel documentation from?
All of that was arranged by Tonian, helped with the arrangement for the travel document. Alfred May, that I mentioned before, also helped with the arrangement for the travel document. All was required, and this is important, ECOWAS member states, that's the Economic Community of West African States, do not require visas for the member states. You can travel on what is called a laissez-passer to any of these countries. And in the case of what we call the Francophone group, and what is that? Those countries in West Africa that had France as their colonial masters are the Francophone. The Anglophone are those that the British were their masters. And so in the case of the Francophone, with an identity card, even without a passport, you could travel. So what we sought to do, and I must admit, I do not know the full detail yet, because don't forget, I'm in jail in Ghana when the first two groups move. But after I get out, this is what I meet. They get laissez-passers from using Tonian's contact, some from the Liberian embassy, and some of these guys, well, let me move that word, guys. Some of these men are guilds. Now, the Guild ethnic group is a very large ethnic group that you find in La Côte d'Ivoire and in Liberia. They speak the same language. In La Côte d'Ivoire, they would throw one or two French words, but a Guild from La Côte d'Ivoire and a Guild from Liberia, you would know the difference, because when they meet, they speak Guild. This is also true for the Manas, and as we progress, this is also true when it comes to the Sierra Leone side of the border. So the Guilds from Liberia that spoke Guild went to the gendarmerie, and speaking Guild, they were able to get identity cards. Now, that's why I went through this whole thing to explain to you. So to become an Ivorian for the Guilds, all you had to do, once you spoke the language, you went to the Ivorian gendarme office in Danane, which is a town, I think that's D-A-N-A-N-E, and that's in the records, or Ema, M-A-N, a little bigger town outside of Danane. Once you got there and you spoke Guild and said that you were coming from, let's say, a border town with Liberia, you were, you know, an Ivorian, and you got a carte d'identité. So they could also use that to travel to Burkina Faso. Because the carte d'identité, they had during that particular period, and I think to a great extent it still is this, you've got this, I think it's something is entente.
Something what?
It's called entente. I think it's a French word, entente.
As in Entente Cordiale.
Voila, that's it.
This is an English-speaking court, by the way, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, well, you said as in cordial. Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, and I want to believe, to a great extent, Senegal. There was a time that ministers, individuals from those countries became French ministers, so that whole cooperation existed. So using an identity card between these countries was very, very simple because they exchanged civil servants. If you were very good and you were, say, for example, Ivorian, you could become a minister in Burkina Faso. A minister in government. It's that type of cordiality that was amongst these states. So that's why it was so easy for the carte d'identité to be used between and amongst them.
And help us with this. What was the criteria for recruitment of men into the NPFL?
First, you had to be of age. You had to be of 18, which is the legal age in Liberia for men. I guess you had to be mad enough to want to fight. You had to be physical, but if you were not serious enough, there were sufficient angry people. You had to be angry enough to want to fight. Physically fit and of age, and you went in.
Now, let's move to Libya then, and I wonder if now I can be assisted with Defense Document 208. Now, Mr. Taylor, we have here a map of Libya. And can you see on that map Tarabulus, Tripoli?
Yes, I can.
Now, the camp to which these men were taken was in what location?
I did say that the men were taken to a town outside of Tripoli called Tajura.
How do you spell that?
That is Tarhurah.
Now, if we look at another map, which looks like this, we see Tarabulus, and we also see highlighted Tajura. Yes?
Yes.
Now, first of all, Mr. Taylor, just physically, what was this camp like at Tajura?
Tajura is a very, very huge former United States military base that was built in Libya before the revolution of Colonel Gaddafi. It's an extraordinarily huge military base that was U.S. owned but had been vacated at the time of the revolution.
When was the first time that you went to Tajura?
Following my release from jail, I visit Libya again. And then the men are now in the camp. I go to the camp to visit them because they had not seen me. I had been in jail for 8 months. They had not seen me. I was just about to take them. They are now on the base, and so I went there to, to greet them and to, tell them thanks for what they were doing
Pause there.
because they had not seen me.
Pause there. How many men are we talking about?
The first 2 groups are already there. They are continuing. The movement is continuing. I get out. I've gone through this process. I go to, I have now gone to France. I have informed Ellen. I come back. I go to Libya now to go and visit with the men. By this time, the first 2 groups of men that have traveled, all I have seen of them myself are the photos. I have not physically met them yet. Even by the time I show those photos to Ellen, I have not met them yet.
But my question, to go back to it, Mr. Taylor, was how many men are in the camp at that stage?
There are about 40, 45 men at that stage.
In due course, what was the maximum number of men that you had at Tajura?
In due course, the total number of men finally reached about 168, I would say. Around about 168.
Now, I want to go through this part in some detail, Mr. Taylor, because you suggested that the plan to terrorize the people of Sierra Leone was hatched in Libya. You appreciate that, don't you?
Yes, I do.
So, taking things slowly and in stages, firstly, what was the Libya to which these recruits were sent?
You say, what was Libya?
Yeah, what was it like?
Well, we are now dealing with a Libya that is championing Pan-African activities. That is helping out across the continent those peoples that believed in the Pan-African approach and those that were interested in democratic governance. And let me make it very clear. When I got to Libya, that Libya that I met was anti-communist. In fact, Libya has never endorsed or embraced communism. It was never then and now. They were helping out in terms of training. They were seriously involved in trying to free the rest of Africa, and that's why I think that Gaddafi, whether people like it or not, is an African hero, by helping people to stand up against some of the terrible, filthy things that were going on the African continent under the guise of their colonial rule, even though it was at the time, neo-colonialism in different shapes and form. He was the only one that had the backbone to stand up to them, and that's the Libya that I met. I met a Pan-African Libya. I met a Libya willing and able to help, and did help almost every major functioning government of any revolutionary credentials from East, Central, to Southern and West Africa. They owe it to the Libyan people.
Now, you mentioned before the luncheon adjournment Mataba.
That is correct.
Now, explain to us, what was Mataba?
The Mataba was an organization set up specifically to support Pan-African revolutionary activities in Africa, and I would hope, I would believe, else places, but I want to deal with Africa, in Africa, that I am positive about.
And I want you to help us. Is Mataba an organization? And if so, how is it composed? Help us, please.
Good. Members, the Mataba is not just Libyans. Individuals with revolutionary zeal, those that were interested in fighting this neo-colonial situation across Africa, you became a member. If you are a leader, you became a member of that organization. So the Mataba was not just Libyans, but the Mataba was those Libyans that were there to help, but they were mostly the organizations across Africa that needed their help comprised the membership.
Right. Now, just give us the names of some of the organizations from around Africa which was part of that Mataba, please.
The ANC, full member. SWAPO.
Where was SWAP upon? Remind us, not everyone is 61
Okay.
years old, Mr. Taylor.
I'm sorry for being so old.
And also, if we could have the full names rather than the acronyms.
Yes, Your Honor. The ANC is the African National Congress that is now in power in South Africa. SWAPO was the Southern African political organization under the
I can't see that there's any dispute about this. It's actually the Southwest
African People's SWAPO that was headed then by our good friend Sam and Juma. You also had the Ghanaian revolution that was headed by Jerry Rawlings.
They were a member too.
Of course.
Who else?
You had Burkina Faso. They were members of the Mataba. You had Uganda, was a member of the Mataba.
What was that organization called, or did it have a name?
No. Uganda went there. This is the time of, we're talking all the way back 86, 87. At that particular time, they did not go there as an organization. My good friend in Uganda was going through his own problems, but they had representatives.
Who's he?
I'm talking about the present president, Museveni.
So he was there as well, was he?
No, not he personally, he had a representative there.
Okay, and what was that representative's name? Do you know? If you don't, tell us.
I don't quite recollect. I will see if I can go through my head, but there was a representative there.
Do you know someone by the name of Mbabazi?
Objection. That is leading.
What do you say, Mr. Griffiths?
Well, Mr. President, I understand that leading questions are not disallowed where you're dealing with non-contentious issues. If it is contentious, then of course I will act with more care. But normally I understand that where you're not dealing with matters in dispute, then there's no objection to leading, but I stand corrected if a different rule applies.
That
Is
was
it in
not the-
dispute?
That was not the position taken during the prosecution case in chief, and we don't know if it's in dispute because we don't know what they want to use it for, and we have no idea who the representative was. So it's not a matter that is of common knowledge.
All right, well, you can renew your objection if it turns out it is in dispute. I'll allow the question. Go ahead.
Very well. Do you know that name, Mr. Taylor?
I know Mbabazi very well.
And who was he?
He was a representative that went in and out from Uganda.
And some spellings Samanjoma, Nujoma, Museveni, Yoweri, Yoweri, Museveni, Museveni, and Amama Mbabazi, Amama Mba Bazi.
Mbabazi.
Yes. Now, so far you've mentioned various groups from around Africa, Mr. Taylor. Were there groups there from any other part of the world?
Yes, we met a group. Some of them I really cannot recall their own affiliations at this particular time, but there were groups from other part of the world.
Help us. What parts of the world?
There were groups from Europe. There were groups
Such
from
as what parts of Europe?
the United Kingdom. There were groups from
Where in the United Kingdom?
well, there were Irish groups there from the IRA. There were IRA representatives. I don't know, because most of these individuals, we have to be lucky to know their names. But there were groups from different parts. That I don't recall some of the names from the southern hemisphere, Sumatra, and I forgot what area that is. Sumatra. There were representatives from the island states, from all over.
So, how many people were, give us an idea, how many people were actually a part of the Mataba? How many people are we talking about?
Well, in terms of individuals, I don't know the number, but in terms of organizations, there could have been as many as 25 different groupings and organizations that comprise the Mataba.
Now, what did the Mataba actually do as an organization? How did it manifest itself?
The Mataba provided funds, provided means of training, provided what I would call an enabling a situation for those that were yearning for change and help. But within that, what you wanted and how you wanted it was a part of a collective discussion. So, for example, let's say I'm at the Mataba, and some of the people that we met, I forgot to mention other groups that were there, were the Gambian group was there. So I reached to the Mataba, and at any given meeting, for example, some of the meetings that I sat in, there were Sierra Leoneans, there was a Sierra Leonean, there was a Gambian, there was a Ghanaian, there was a Burkinabe, there could be a South African, but you would sit down, discuss your problems and what possibly had to be done to assist you, what type of assistance. Libyans would sit in the meeting, and based on your own personal desires, the Libyans would come in and help you to achieve that. But you had to go through a process, what we call then establishing your revolutionary, credentials. So no flukies went to sit at the Mataba to talk about revolution. You had to be practically vetted. You had to know what you were talking about. And what do I mean by fluky? You could not just go to Libya and say, hey, I want to launch a revolution and become a member of the Mataba. You had to show that you had the capacity, and if you wanted to stage, let's say, an armed struggle, you had to show that you had the manpower to accomplish it, and that you were willing to be disciplined, because, and respect laws of war. We had to go through all of this at the Mataba. So, for example, those people that I associated with during the time I was there were the Sierra Leonean leader, Ali Kaba, the Gambian leader, Dr. Manny, M-A-N-N-E-H, Kukuya Samba Sanye is his real name. We're going to have to get the thing for that. The Burkinabe people, not people, the Burkinabe representative that was there. And so we'll go through this discussion and determine if or what you tell your problem and see how we could converge together. So the Mataba must not be looked at as though it was an organization on its own. The Mataba was an organization within itself comprising individuals that wanted to stage Pan-African activities on the continent.
I need to press you for more information on this, Mr. Taylor. So you've explained the composition of the group. You've explained how you needed to establish your revolutionary credentials. Was there an overarching philosophy at the Mataba?
You know, I've always not gone into these political philosophies. The Mataba did not press anyone to adopt Libyan-style government or movement. The Mataba was about assisting in the overall philosophy of Pan-Africanism, where Africans would want to take control of their own continent, and I mean real control. That's the principal philosophy that we met there.
For example, we appreciate the link between Colonel Gaddafi and the Little Green Book. Was that required reading for everyone at the Mataba?
Yes, you were required to at least read it, but you were not required to adopt it as a philosophy or else.
So was there an all-encompassing philosophy at the Mataba, which had, for example, a Marxist-Leninist base?
Gaddafi would have never permitted anyone to stay in Libya if you had a Marxist-Leninist communist base. I said before in my testimony, he was and is not communist. So it had to do with Pan-African approach as far as a political philosophy was concerned. Gaddafi is a socialist as far as the economic ideas are concerned. Okay, so no. He was not that that Marxist. Marxism. No.
Give us an idea of the total number of people who were at that camp at Tajura.
I don't know.
What are we talking about, Mr. Taylor? Can you give us some kind of idea?
Well, let me tell you what I mean.
In total.
No, I don't know. I'll put it this way. The leaders of the groupings in Libya did not stay in the camps. They visited their men in the camps. In the camps, all groupings that went, the camp Tajura is so huge, it probably could train 10, 15, 20,000 people at a time. But I would be misleading to say that I can approximate the number of people that were in there. But what I do know, when I arrived in Libya with my men, the Sierra Union group was already in Libya. The Gambian group was already in Libya. The first Liberian group taken by Dr. Famle was already in Libya. Now, I did not even know how many Liberians were in that first group, because you are not concerned and you are not permitted to associate with other groups. The only thing you knew that groups were there because you met their leaders almost on a daily basis, not in the camp, but in Tripoli, at the Mataba.
Now, why I'm asking you about numbers is I want to get an idea of how easy it would be to know, for example, all the members who were there from South Africa who were training all the members from Gambia were training. That's why I'm asking. So, did you have any idea about that?
No. I hope this explanation will help the court. You're talking about a very, very huge military base that I think, and I stand corrected on this, maybe the records will show, may have been the largest U.S. base in Libya at the time. So United States bases are not small bases. They are humongous. Now, there were large groups because their leaders were they're considered to be, extraordinary. The Liberian group that I carry may have been one of the smallest group. The point I'm trying to make here is that that base was capable of training at any one time 10, 15, 20,000 people, and there were times that you could have had as many, and I don't want questions to come up later where you said that there were 10,000 or 15,000 people. There were probably more people, because when you think about some of the groups that went there for training, some people carried thousands of people. But the point I want to drive home here is that you would very rarely be able to put your finger on exact amounts, because no matter how small or how large the group was, it was not your business. You did not have contact with the groups. You only had contacts with the leaders.
Were you ever permanently based at the camp in Libya, Mr. Taylor?
Never. I just said that I never lived at the camp. No leader in Libya that was a member of the Mataba lived at the military barracks at Tajura. You had an apartment in Tripoli. There was a guest house for those of us that went in and came out, that stayed at the guest house in Libya or at a hotel in Tripoli. But you never, ever stayed in the camp. You could go and visit your men for several hours, sit around, talk with them, which was encouraged, because you don't want to just carry people to a military camp, drop them, they never hear from you again, when you just come back and say, hey, guess what, we're ready to take you. So you could go, which was a good idea, and it showed good leadership skills, to go and sit with your men. Now, it must be important to note this. The men within the camp did associate with each other. So, for example, people from, I would say, the African continent, most of the men that trained, a lot of them knew each other very well, because they were in the same camp. And sometimes, let's say, my men, for example, 168 men did not comprise, that's just about, I would say, probably a company size, militarily, one company. And so so if they wanted to, say, train a battalion size, maybe 400 or 500 men, they would put groups together. But that is for the training of the men in the camp. But they would not permit leaders to go there, to go and meddle with other people or get to know who was there. That was not your business. The men knew each other, but the leaders knew each other.
Were the leaders in Tripoli based in the same guest house?
Some were in the guest house. Some were in hotels. Ali Kaba, Kukuya Samba Sanye, myself, most of the West Africans that did not really stay there a whole lot used the Mataba guest house. I had, there was an apartment in Tripoli that I used. Okay, but most of them, and I came to Mataba every day, and as is normal, and I'm sure the judges will understand it. You're from West Africa, of course you want to hang with West Africans. So at the Mataba, most times, Dr. Manny, Ali Kaba, myself will be together, conversing all of the time when I was there. So
what about Fode Sanko?
Fode Sanko was, I tell you, what I heard of Fode Sanko for the first time on the BBC. Fode Sanko was nothing. He was not at the Mataba Fode Sanko was apparently one of Ali Kaba's men that were in the camp. Fode Sanko knew my men. I did not know Fode Sanko, just as Ali Kaba did not know my men. No, Fode Sanko was nowhere with the type of credentials to be a member of the Mataba. Because if he had to be a member of the Mataba, then it meant that Ali Kaba would not be there. And it was Ali Kaba there.
And Ali Kaba, that surname Kaba, who's he related to?
Well, I'm going to tell you what Ali told me. Ali Kaba told me that he had been a student, a Pan-African student activist at Furabe College in Sierra Leone. There were problems at Furabe. I think he got in trouble once or twice. Either got thrown out. And I want to be sure of this, because again, in Africa, when you say uncle, father, brother, you have to be very careful. But Tijani Kaba, former President Tijani Kaba, Ali told me, upon his retirement from the United Nations, where Tijani, I think, had risen to the rank of Undersecretary General, had retired, he sought to move Ali from Sierra Leone.
Who sought to move Ali?
I'm saying Tijani Kaba. Move Ali from Sierra Leone because of the problems he was experiencing, and a few other individuals from Furabe into Ghana and on to Libya, where this whole Pan-African thing was going on. And that's what I know about him, that Ali told me that Tijani is his uncle. Now, I could be asked about this, and I don't know whether it's an African uncle or a biological uncle, because in Africa, when we say uncle, it could mean an older man or whatever. But that's how he got there, and Tijani knew he was there. That's what Ali told me. I met him there, I met that group there.
Can I pause for a moment and deal with some spellings, please? Dr. Mane, M-A-N-N-E-H, whose name is also Kukwai Samba Sanyang, K-U-K-O-I, new word Samba, S-A-M-B-A, new word S-A-N-Y-A-N-G, Burkinabe, B-U-R-K-I-N-A-B-E. Is there anything else with which I can assist at this stage, Mr. President?
Thanks, Mr. Griffiths. I can't think of anything at the moment.
Now, what kind of training did you want for your men at Tajura, Mr. Taylor?
My own revolution, as we planned, was based on one principal strategy, that my men would be trained in military discipline, and that they will be well trained, and that these men would then stand as the eyes and ears of the revolution that was actually to be launched by the Liberian people. By that I mean going back into Nimba. And so they did military training, and I think my men probably stayed in Libya longer than almost any group. As a matter of fact, because I do not know exactly when the Sierra Leonean group got there, but I remember the Sierra Leonean group left Libya before my group. I do not know where they went to, but I lost sight of Ali as of that time.
Let's unpack that a little further, please. Firstly, when did your men first arrive in Libya?
The men, remember I mentioned I was still in jail. The men started arriving in Libya in early, what that would be, 87, that had to be, early 87. They started arriving in Libya.
And when did they leave?
Oh, my men did not leave Libya until around the middle of 89. Almost 2 full years of military training.
Now, during that 2-year period, help us, how much time did you spend in Tajura?
None. A day, several hours at a time whenever I was there. I just mentioned for the record, no other leader lived in Tajura. We could not.
How regularly would you visit then?
I, during that period, would probably visit Libya probably once every 3 or 4 months. And when I did not go, Tom Woyu would go visit with the men because I was busy trying to plan what the men would do when they returned from Libya. Now, for not to confuse anyone, you have 168 men in Libya that have been trained. But Libya is far away from Liberia, so how are you going to get these men back from Libya and more particularly get them into Liberia was what I was involved with, moving in the West African sub-region in trying to put that end of it together so by the time the men actually were ready that there would be an available country to take them, one with close proximity to Liberia that they would be able to enter. That was my job. So I did not run up and down on that at that particular place.
So where were you based during that period?
Burkina Faso.
Where in Burkina Faso?
Ouagadougou, the capital. I had a house there.
Were you living in that house by yourself?
No. I was living there with Agnes.
And where's Tupi at this time?
Tupi and I mean, we are separated, and
But where was she
she's
living?
in the United States.
Now, you've told us that you were aware that there were Sierra Leoneans in the camp at Tajura.
That is correct.
Do you know when they'd arrived there?
Not particularly, no. I just knew that they were there. Ali was there. He told me that his men were in the camp.
Did you know how many Sierra Leoneans were there?
No, I did not.
You
And
mentioned...
that is not odd because I did not even know how many other Liberians were there.
I don't follow that, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm trying to say it is not odd that I would not know how many Sierra Leoneans were there because it was nobody's business. I did not even know how many other Liberians. Remember, I mentioned to the court that Dr. Famule had men in the camp. I didn't even know how many men he had in the camp, even though they were Liberians.
What about Gambians? Did you have any idea how many Gambians were there?
Yes, because the Gambians were not in the camps. The Gambians had, before we got to Libya, had attempted an uprising in the Gambia, led by Kukuya Samasanye, about a year or maybe earlier, and had fled the Gambia. So they were already trained soldiers. They were not more than, I would say, 25. I know this because the Gambians were used as security personnel at the Mataba facilities. Okay, so they were not trainees anymore. They were like revolutionaries, had already attempted a revolution, had failed, and they were all there. Their leader was there. So we got to know most of the boys because they were outside at the gates. They were the security personnel at the Mataba.
Now, you've told us about meeting with Ali Kaba Dr. Manning. Concentrating on those two for the moment, did you come to any mutual agreement with them to assist each other in your revolution?
Not at all. We were there looking for assistance ourselves. So how could we assist anybody? No one was looking for assistance. In my case, no. In Ali's case, no. In Manning's case, no. Because in fact, we were there, and all the assistance that we needed, we were getting it through our Mataba colleagues.
Maybe you misunderstand me, Mr. Taylor. Did you say, for example, to Ali Kaba, when I launch my revolution, I want you to help me?
Never, no. No.
That is leading the witness. It would be much better if the witness would testify.
Well,
I've had it. Look, it's very clear. I did not seek any assistance from Ali Kaba. Ali Kaba did not seek any assistance from me. I said Manning did not seek any assistance from me or Ali Kaba, and vice versa. We were not in a mataba to ask to assist each other in what they wanted to do. We were there to exchange Pan-African jargons and talk about it, but at no time did I promise Ali Kaba or he promised me. At no time did I request from Ali Kaba an assistance, or at no time did Ali Kaba ask of any or for any assistance from me. At no time. Because Ali Kaba's own revolution, as far as he had explained it to me, Ali Kaba, who, by the way, if it were possible, we'll still bring him to this court because I think he's available, he's just frightened. Ali Kaba said to me that within the armed forces of Sierra Leone and the police and the other security apparatus, he had all of the assistance that he needed, and that the men he was training in Libya would return directly to Sierra Leone, and that upon the return from inside Sierra Leone, they would launch the revolution. So there was no request or nothing from him to me or from me to him. It was not necessary. It did not happen. There were no promises and could have never been.
Another aspect of this, and you appreciate why I'm asking you about in such detail about this, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I do.
You've already explained that your men were receiving military training. Now, apart from military training, was there any kind of ideological or philosophical training?
No. My men did not receive any ideological or philosophical training. At Tajura, the men, I was aware of the fact that all, and may I say most of the people there, were given an opportunity to read the Green Book. But the Green Book was not a prerequisite for assistance. So we were not subjected to ideological or psychological training at all. We were there for our own revolution, to launch it our way. We were given an opportunity to read the Green Book. If we wanted anything, fine. I did not subscribe to everything that was a part of the Green Book. So my people were not ideologically trained with the Green Book, no.
But help us, Mr. Taylor, on those occasions when you visited the camp, did you address the men as a collective, collectively?
Oh, yes. My men?
Now help us.
My men.
Yes. Now help us. What did you say to them as to why they're there, what your intention is, what you're seeking to achieve? What did you tell them?
Well, very simple. Don't let's forget Liberia was not in in the dark at the time of these people, and these men that were there, they were not of the caliber of the People's Redemption Council. We had educated people. For example, I told you, Will, you went there. We talked about this change of moving dough. We talked about the type of government that we wanted to set up that would be free of tribalism, sectionalism, and all this kind of stuff. We talked about eliminating
Well,
this.
I'm not interested in all this kind of stuff.
But that's what we talked about.
I want you to spell it out, please. It is suggested that you formed a plan there to terrorize the civilian population. So take your time, Mr. Taylor, and tell us, what was the plan?
The whole purpose for the 2 years that we spent in Libya was to make sure that people were trained as military people and trained in the laws of war. We realized, and I have made it very clear to this court, the 168 men that we trained, we were basically depending on the civilian population in Liberia to launch the revolution. Now, it would be silly and really stupid for anyone wanting to launch a revolution using civilians to want to terrorize them. We were too small a number to go and fight a war. So we needed the people. So principally we dealt with how to act with civilians, how to behave,
And
what
how
to
was
do.
that?
Well, you do not harass people, you do not take their goats, their chickens, you do not rape, you do not loot, and where, even during the crisis, where it happened, we acted. So we dealt directly with organizing our people to first of all care for any revolutionary leader, any guerrilla leader must know that unless you take good care of the civilians, you will go no place. And so primarily, we considered our attitude toward the civilian population as paramount to being successful in our revolution. And because we did, we were successful.
So what did you say to them about the type of government you wanted to establish in Liberia?
It was going to be a democratic government. We wanted to go in, launch the revolution, and submit ourselves to free and fair elections.
And help us, because again, this is relevant. What was the military philosophy taught at the camp?
Well, when you talk about philosophy, I'm going to need some help from the court. In terms of military philosophy, there could be quite a few, but maybe I'll get some assistance from the court on this. What do you mean by military philosophy?
Well, how were your soldiers taught, or were they taught as to how to wage their guerrilla war, what tactics to adopt?
Well, okay, I'm not sure if we're talking philosophy or military strategy. As far as, I thought I had dealt with this, but
Well, all right.
well, I'll go back through it. There was an overall strategy, and again, 168 men don't launch a war in a country. We sought to have our men well trained and disciplined, and well, basically in military you have discipline and courtesy, to make sure that we could go in, sufficiently work with the local population. Once we had launched the revolution, where the local population will come in and help. We did not have to coerce them. We did not have to subject them to any abuse. And that through that process, our numbers will rise, they will be trained basically, and we will be successful in our revolution. That is basically the overall strategy that we designed.
Well, I'm sorry for laboring this, but it's so important I fear I must. What was the philosophy regarding the treatment of civilians?
You know, I guess we you know, go in this and that, but I will just answer you. I said earlier, if you abuse any civilians, if you took their property away from them, if you took their homes from them, you will lose their support. What we said that military people will deal with military people, but civilians will deal with civilians, and this is why even as we entered Liberia, we did not dismantle the civilian apparatus that we met on the ground. We took advantage of our chiefs, our elders, our Zoes, to work along with the population. They were
what?
told...
Zoes?
Well, yeah, Zoes, Z-O-E-S. Our Zoes are our traditional native people. That anything involving civilians should be referred to the civilian administration. Anything military will be dealt with the military. That is why, in my testimony, I think yesterday, I mentioned very clearly that we accept that those military people that carried out atrocities were arrested, they were court-martialed under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and they were dealt with. And that is why there is not one instance that have been presented before this court where there was a civilian that was executed by the military command of the NPFL. It is because of the separation that we did. We separated military activities from civilian activities and left the civilian activities to the civilian administration in the country.
Let me break it down further. What was said about the treatment of children?
We did not at all encourage any children under the age of 17 to be involved in military activities. We did not, in fact, we did not close the schools. And this is one thing that has not come out
No,
of this
Mr.
trial.
Taylor. I'm talking about Libya, where the plan is supposed to start. What was taught about how children should be treated?
Well, just... Are you there, Mr. Interpreter?
What's happening? I'm on channel 1. So, no, I don't want to hear it.
I think it's being adjusted. The court manager's inquiring as to which channel has been switched.
Your Honor, the AV booth is liaising with the interpretation to find out what could have transpired.
Well, in the meantime, can we continue without interruption? Have they adjusted whatever they were doing wrong?
Your Honor, they're checking. I'll give them a call back to find out.
We'll go ahead and let's just hope it doesn't happen again, Mr. Griffiths.
Very well.
Well, in answer to your question, no child was to be recruited or used or trained for military activities. That's the order as regards children. Only people of military age, men and women, were to be received for military training.
Now, what did the actual military training consist of, Mr. Taylor?
Basic drills, learning how to what you call conceal yourself in combat. They learn how to assemble, well, first disassemble and assemble rifles. They learn how to take position to shoot. They learn military formation. They learned how to carry out search procedures. They learned how to carry out cordon procedures. They learned, and we were very specific about this, they learned how to also individually care for prisoners of war. They learned how to deal with prisoners of war. And even those that were trained also learned, part of their military training, how to deal with civilian populations. This was the entire course.
And was all the training...
Mr. Griffiths, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No
There-
problem.
There was just one part of that piece of evidence I didn't understand, and that was the reference to, was it cordon procedures?
Yes, cordon. What cordon procedure is, Your Honor? If the military went into an area to search it, they would secure the area before searching. It's called I think cordon. That's how I know it, cordon.
No, I understand now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very well.
And was all of this training land-based?
In Liberia?
In Libya?
In Libya, no. We did both land and we did seaborne operations.
Any others?
These were basically land and sea-based operations. I don't recall any other right now.
And what did the sea-based operations involve?
Oh, learning how to, we call them Navy commandos, how to use small boats to navigate secretly into enemy territory using the sea. There were a few that specialized in carrying out diving activities. For example, you could dive and go into areas, and we did this because Liberia has one of the longest coastlines in West Africa. And so how do you get from one point, if we had to use the sea, these Navy personnel could use it, because for us, they are sighting, and when I talk about boat, I'm not just, let me just, maybe there's another name for it. It is boat too, but they are sighting trees in Liberia that we use for what we call a canoe. It's a very light wood that you cut, and you can dig it out, hollow it out, and use it. And we knew that this existed, so even if we did not have the Western-built little boats, we could almost use our canoe, okay, to do it. So we got that and trained Navy personnel, and most importantly, to swim. How to swim, rest, and don't ask me, I don't know how it's done, but they were trained to do it. You can swim in the water, rest in the water. Now, that's almost impossible for me. Rest in the water and continue swimming. And so if we had to get to certain areas on the Liberian coast, otherwise we needed people that were trained that could do that. So we did the seaborne training.
Now, was Tajura a terrorist training camp, Mr. Taylor?
Tajura was never and is never a terrorist training camp. And in fact, if it had been, I think the United States would have destroyed it. Because we were still in Libya when I think the Reagan administration, if I'm not mistaken, ordered the bombing of Tripoli.
You were there at the time.
My men were there during that raid on Tripoli, and I am just surmising here that if they felt, and the buildings that were bombed were in Tripoli, that if Reagan, who ordered the bombing of Tripoli, thought in his mind that Tajura was a terrorist base, they would have bombed it.
I want to move on now, please. You earlier mentioned that there were three principal personalities behind the organization of the NPFL.
That is correct.
Did anyone eventually emerge as an undisputed leader?
Yes, I did.
By what process did that occur?
Well, during the training, in fact, an important arrangement came up. That decision was actually made by the men that had been taken to do the training. Now, let me explain this. I'm affected, yes, but the individuals from Nimba, the Nimbadians, the Dan and Ma individuals that comprised 90% of the personnel in training, see this also as their revolution and an opportunity to go back and avenge the death of their people. In fact, what these people in Nimba at the time were actually looking for, they were really looking for a leader, somebody that could put a program together for them to go back and fight Doe. I mean, this was it. And so we came up with an arrangement. We sat, and the arrangement was this. Okay, Mr. Taylor, you have gone through all of this headache. You've helped to put this whole thing together. The arrangement is this. We get back to Liberia, God willing, we succeed. You are the leader. But one of us must be your vice president. So, in direct answer to your question, that decision was taken by the men that were taken for training. That was their decision.
And when was that decision made?
That decision was made in training in 1988, before we left to come to Liberia, or West Africa at least.
Now, this training was going on for some 2 years. Did it go totally undetected to your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, it went undetected.
No one knew?
Well, when you say no one, I can't say absolutely no one, but I think those people that matter, and I'm speaking about Doe, surely did not know because he never accused Libya at the time. We did not get this feedback from any major Western intelligence source. And so I can't say no one, but I think those that it would have mattered for did not really get to know.
Moving on. Does there come a time, Mr. Taylor, when it's decided that training has come to an end and your forces must be moved on?
Yes, and this is the hard part that I explained earlier, that I had been in and out because I had to put certain programs together. I had come to West Africa. There was no problem in the men coming to Burkina Faso. They left from Burkina Faso. But the problem was, at what point do they enter Liberia to launch the revolution? So they surely could not probably do it from La Côte d'Ivoire because there were just too many people, so we did not think about La Côte d'Ivoire initially. That left one option, going back to our old friends in Sierra Leone. I travel, and as I recall now, and I'm glad that I probably mentioned it earlier, Your Honors, actually the Kurongba situation was with Siaka Stevens. Because now I think Momo is chief of staff at the time. I'll now go, and Momo is president by late 88, by 89. I then go to Momo, and the contacts with Momo, sadly, there was a gentleman, he's late now, called Prince Barclay, who,
Barclay spelled out.
Barclay, who was part Liberian and part Sierra Leonean, that knew Mohammed Doumbouya very well. So arrangements were made through Doumbouya to see if I could come down to Sierra Leone to speak to Joseph Momo. Those arrangements were concluded, and so I flew into Freetown. I meet with Doumbouya, and he introduces me to a very nice gentleman that is dead now, who was a personal, trusted friend of General Momo.
Who's that person?
The gentleman is, I want to know his last name because we called him, he was a Brigadier Toronkai, a very shortish man, very good, nice guy, Brigadier Toronkai, who was a Deputy Chief of Staff then of the Sierra Leone Armed Forces.
Pause. Any chance of a spelling, Mr. Taylor? I know it's
Toronkai.
late
Maybe
in
we
the
could
day.
ask your colleagues on the opposite side to help us. Mr. Mohammed, he should know, it's a Sierra Leonean name, Toronkai. It could be Torenkai. I'm not too sure, I'm sorry, honest. But it's Toronkai.
But I'm not going to be the one to ask them.
I think we'll continue, Mr. Griffiths, and the name may come up again.
Brigadier Toronkai, short, nice gentleman, met with me, and he went on to President Momo and explained to him that I had arrived, and that night I was taken to President Momo. Now,
Pause for a moment, Mr. Taylor. Can you help us with a date here?
oh boy, this I would say was in the this had to be in '89. I would say about the first quarter of '89. About the don't hold me on this, but it was about the first quarter of '89, and I was really struggling trying to get this thing going. Now, Toronkai was not the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. The Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces was Major General, I just remember the last name, Terawale. I remember that very well. But Momo did not trust Terawale, so he entrusted this operation with Toronkai and said to me specifically that he didn't want Terawale to know anything about this. And so in that meeting were President Momo, Brigadier Toronkai, and myself met. We had discussions. Momo remembered as Deputy Chief of, as Chief of Staff, the first operation.
Which operation is that?
That's the operation that I mentioned that involved General Tamon Skuwangpa. But he had some concerns. Momo said to me, he said, look, the first attack out of here that Kuwangpa went with did not succeed. And though almost retaliated by trying to overrun this country. I have to be absolutely sure, one, that you have the manpower to carry out the operation successfully, and two, that you have the equipment to do it. I showed him on both counts that we had the manpower and we had the equipment to do the job.
Pause. Did you have the equipment?
We had been promised the equipment from Libya at the time, but when I told Momo, he balked again. His second concern was this quantity of equipment, if it came here, what if it got into the hands of the Sierra Leone Army? They'd probably move me. So we were busy talking about this, and he decided that he wanted me to go and return at a later date. He and Toronkai would throw it around and see how, if he permitted such equipment to come to the country, how it could come, be moved out almost immediately to the point on the Sierra Leone-Liberian border to enter, and making sure that it was all out. He had to work that out in his own head first, and then work it out with Toronkai to see how it will work. And so I left Sierra Leone only to return at a later date.
And how soon after did you return?
I returned, I would approximately say after about 2 months. I returned because by this time the men were through with training, and one thing you get to learn, when you train people for a mission, you send them out to carry the mission. If not, they get lazy, they get tired, and they probably forget what what they learned. And these are soldiers. And so I returned after 2 months at a very bad time.
Why?
Momo had traveled to London. I think there was a donors conference. And so I arrived, I meet with Dumuya, I meet with Brigadier Toronkai. But at that time, there was a very, how do I call him? A very tough, terrible guy that was the Inspector General of Police by the name of Bambi Kamara. I think he's late, Bambi Kamara. I do not know whether Bambi worked for Doe or whatever, but there is a sense that any one of us entering Sierra Leone meant something, and apparently Doe had established good intelligence in Sierra Leone. I arrived there, President Momo is out of the country. Bambi Kamara arrests me. Now, there's a problem here. Toronkai knows the whole deal. Dumbuya knows the whole deal. But Dumbuya in the SSD is a member of the police. And he is only a junior assistant, I think, superintendent of police. So even though he's commanding the SSD, but he's low in the rank, so he cannot question Bambi. Toronkai is in a mess because his boss, the chief of staff, Major General Tarwale, does not know about this deal. So Bambi arrests me. They rush to Toronkai and Dumuya. Dumuya has to run for cover because he probably could have gotten arrested. Toronkai intervenes with Bambi. Bambi doesn't want to listen to Toronkai. He calls Tarwale. Tarwale doesn't know. Tarwale gets angry that this thing, in fact, Toronkai tells him, oh, the president is aware that Mr. Taylor is here and he's invited him. And don't touch him, I know. So Tarwale is asking him, but what do you know? He can't tell him because the president doesn't want for Tarwale to know. So I'm stuck and I'm put in Pademaro prison. I'm there for about 3 days. Momo is informed by Toronkai. He rushes back, releases me, puts me on a plane, gets me out of the country immediately. That ends the whole Sierra Leone thing. There are no arms, there's nothing that come. Sierra Leone at that particular time is dead. But Momo and I are still in contact. But
What do you mean you're still in contact?
oh, Prince Barclay is taking messages from me to President Momo, to Brigadier Toronkai, who is still trying to say it's over. He is saying, oh, the news is out now, so it's a risk. So he kept delaying and delaying and delaying, and may I say rightfully so, because in fact the news had leaked. By this time, in Liberia, Doe is already aware of this arrest, and not knowing that I'm released, is calling for Momo to extradite me to Liberia. So this is the whole picture. So with all of these things spilling, the newspapers are covering it, Momo decides to just hold fast. So he's telling us that, look, you got to wait until this thing dies down. But in the meantime, the men are just getting nervous, and they are stuck in Tripoli now for 2 years. So we decide that I will take another move, or make another move.
But just to complete the circle at this point, did your arrest in Sierra Leone cause you to have any antipathy towards Momo?
No, not at all, not at all, not at all. President Momo and I remain good friends. Momo was not responsible. In fact, he cut short his trip to London because things were getting so much out of control. He had to rush back and control this himself. And we remain very good friends. No, if Momo had wanted to do evil to me, he would have turned me over the door. No, he remained my very good friend. Even when I launched the revolution in Liberia, Prince Barclay was still getting messages into Momo. No, he remained a very good friend of mine.
And was he still your friend in 1991, March?
Well, not exactly. By March of 1991, this situation occurred where if I'm not mistaken, this is about the attack on Sierra Leone, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And it was virtually impossible in all the attempts that I made to convince Momo. You know, and this is why maybe it's good we're in this court. You know, you have to distinguish between all the propaganda and the rumors and the lies. Here I am. You can't blame Momo. There's an attack in Sierra Leone, and I'm telling Momo, I don't know anything about it. But there are others telling Momo, oh, he does know about it. It can't happen unless you know it. So finally, there is a problem because in about, I think around January, there had been a little looting incident on the border between Liberia and Sierra Leone, where the Sierra Leonean soldiers and our own soldiers had an altercation over looted property. And so people just kept pumping Momo, how he must know, and if he doesn't know, then who else would know? And this continued and continued, but this fighting was going on. That is what subsequently led to the Ulimo coming into Liberia, because Momo was convinced, beyond reasonable doubt, appeared, that because his friend had done this to him, he had to do something too. And that's why he armed Ulimo. Then later on, I sought, to work with the RUF. So this is how all this happened, just on, okay, it must be so, it's not so. And this happens all the time, between countries, where one leader would accuse the other. It's got nothing to do with facts, but this is what happens.
Now, during these travels around West Africa to Sierra Leone, for example, if you just described, where did you maintain your base, so to speak?
In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Don't forget, Ghana is a no-no because they've already given me 48 hours. I'm never to go back there. So
from the time of your release until the launch of the revolution in 1989, December, where are you based?
Burkina Faso.
Can I give us a spelling? James Bamba, B-A-M-B-A, Kamara, K-M-A-R-A. And what was his position?
Well, I think it's, well, we used to call it Bambi, maybe it's Bamba, Bambi Kamara. He is Inspector General of Police.
Of which police?
Of Sierra Leone.
And I'm told, Mr. President, that the spelling for Toronka is T-O-R-O-N-K-A-I.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths.
Can I, before I forget, ask that the two maps be marked for identification?
Yes, well, we'll make them, I think I can safely say MFI 1, and we'll make them A and B. The untitled map will be MFI 1A, and the map entitled Libyan Arab Jamahiriya will be MFI 1B.
I'm grateful. Would that bit then be a convenient point?
Yes, we'll adjourn today and continue at 9:30 tomorrow. And Mr. Taylor, you're going to be hearing this every day, but it's something I must say. You're cautioned not to discuss your evidence with any other person. Thank you. We'll adjourn.
All rise.